last left-wing party has cocked. The world is at war.
Isaac, how you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on.
Alrighty. So we actually met in. Well, I joined the CRs in late October ish.
Yeah, around there.
A couple meetings in, and then Justin, the president at the time, mentioned a Trump campaign trip to Albuquerque, and I'd like to think that's where me and you got to know each other much better, and develop the dynamic we now have.
Yeah, definitely. Very very close knit group we had there.
Yeah, throwing four guys in a hotel room and some beer and some beer and they'll just let the good times roll from there.
Yeah.
Especially with your very good taste in beer, I might add.
Yeah, I mean the other guys still knock on me about that, but thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a beer snob. Frankly, I'll take anything anyone ever gives me. But if I did have a choice, it would usually be dark beers and IPAs, both of which are your favorites as well.
Yes, definitely.
I don't know. Let's briefly recount the experiences to our audience here about what exactly we faced in Albuquerque. And now, sort of a little precursor to this is that. We, four of us from the UTEP College Republicans, University of Texas at El Paso, joined some of Texas Tech's College Republicans and some other members of Republican task forces from Texas to head up to Albuquerque, New Mexico to do some sort of last-minute campaigning for the Donald Trump campaign. And the four of us, four Hispanic kids, four brown Republicans, were sent to some of the bluest neighborhoods in Albuquerque imaginable. And I'll let Isaac take over from here, but the things we experienced and the fun we had was glorious. Isaac, take it away.
So, I mean, it didn't even really take much to just make these people foam at the mouth. I remember you had your Trump gear on, you had your MAGA hat on, you had your MAGA shirt on, and of course the rest of us had our Trump pamphlets. And we were going door to door, just putting these little pamphlets on people's doorknobs and quietly walking away. If they were there, we would talk to them a little bit, if they would talk to us. But a lot of people made it known to us that we weren't welcome in their neighborhoods. But the best part about that is, I think you and I, at least, come from working class families. And we're in these rich white neighborhoods, and they're telling us that we're not welcome there, and that that one lady called us fascists and said and I quote, "Get the fuck out of my neighborhood, you fucking fascists." And all I was doing was giving her heart signs and smiling and saying, "But I love you. Like, why are you so mean?"
It was kind of funny too, because that was actually not too far into our first morning.
Yeah, actually, that was like the first hour, I think.
So like to start off like that, I was like, oh boy, we're in for some good times, aren't we?
Yeah, and I think that's what led to the drinking later on in that trip, because man, it was stressful. Like, getting yelled at is really stressful, like, from complete strangers.
No, I don't know. I don't need stress to drink.
Yeah.
I do it just because I like the new tastes, being a relatively new drinker, and and just the relaxing and social effect it can have. You speak for yourself, man. I wasn't that stressed. I was physically exhausted, but
yeah, I don't know. I just enjoyed the whole idea of, oh, well, there's a Bernie sign or there's a Hillary sign. Like, let's go fuck with these people. And like, I think with any other type of politically aligned person, you could put a Hillary sign on a Trump, Trump house, and they'd be fine. They'd, say, whatever. But like, these people were pissed. I mean, like, one guy called us out when we were already halfway down the block to tell us that he was throwing away our trash for us, and then there was that lady and her boyfriend, otherkin looking thing, who told us we weren't welcome in that neighborhood, and then the old guy riding the bicycle who said wrong fucking neighborhood. Of course, that one lady who looked way too young to own that house, so it had to be her parents' house, and just foaming at the mouth, like just screaming at me from her kitchen sink.
Wasn't there like a couple of chicks? It might have been like a mother and a daughter or something that were saying that they were avid feminists and they supported Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
And like she started out calmly, but her volume just gradually escalated like this until she's talking like this.
Yeah. And then the two old ladies that told us to get off their driveway before I even said anything. And then the guy who called me a wannabe white boy.
That guy.
That dude was...
I was so pissed that I was on the other side of the street when that happened, because I wanted to hear that exchange. An older, richer white man telling you, a poorer Hispanic kid... obviously Hispanic, facial hair, your hair is relatively unkempt, just saying.
Yeah.
And you always wear that same damn, light hoodie of yours.
Yep.
But seeing it from afar, I was like, how self-unaware are these people? I mean, seriously.
Well, once you leave the liberal reservation, it seems, the race card is just completely useless. It's no longer, well, he's Hispanic versus a white guy. It's liberal versus, a bootlicking fascist.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's usually what their go-to insult is nowadays. If you're brown, is you're a bootlicker. That's my favorite one.
or if in the case of if you're African American, they'll call you an Uncle Tom.
Which they call the blacks some of the most awful things I've ever heard.
House nigger.
Yeah, or coon, or it's just like, damn, you guys really hate these people once they turn on you.
Oh, dude, and who was it he did that impression? He's like, yes, massa, you want me to do a jig for you?
Oh, yeah. What's his name? The guy who ran the Social Democrats. Or the Justice.
Kyle Kalinske.
Yeah, that guy's such a douche.
Yeah. Here he is, on like stage, in public, doing this vehemently racist interpretation of a black slave when talking about Herman Cain, an accomplished businessman.
Well, I think the fact that he hasn't been ousted already, or just people aren't calling for his head, kind of shows the double standard where, oh, it's okay when we do it.
Yeah, exactly.
I think there shouldn't be really any standard, but... I mean, what can you really do?
Yeah, it's kind of like Milo Yiannopoulos, my personal hero and idol. During one of his installments of the Dangerous Faggot Tour, he said, "You know what? I get it. Some of you guys just despise the alt-right. I mean, I'm not a part of them. I don't like them, but they're harmless." And he actually gave a list of, it was like 10, but it ended up being like 13 steps to destroy the alt-right. And somewhere near the top of the list, I think it might have actually been like the top of the list, was either have identity politics for everyone or identity politics for no one. Make up your damn minds.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't understand why it's so, I guess, deplorable to have a white nationalist or white supremacist, but it's perfectly fine to have somebody that holds these really regressive ideas like, I'm a Chicano, or I'm a Black Power advocate.
And I believe we can call lightning down from the sky. And you questioning my scientific merit as racist.
Yeah, Uhuru or whatever it is.
We was Kangs.
Yeah. But yeah, I just, that double standard, it just kind of shows that they're using this tent of oppression to just garner votes and support, and demonize the opposition. I mean, you ask anybody that's gone through the public education system that wasn't raised as a conservative, and you ask them what's a liberal, what's a Democrat, or what's a Democrat, what's a Republican, and it's just night and day. You know, it's women, it's people of color. Oh God, I hate that term. But people of color and poor people are all Democrats, and it's just rich old white men that are Republicans. And it's just like, really,
And it's funny. I've had people ask me when I tell them that I'm a Republican. They said they'll ask me, and I kid you not, "Oh, are you rich?" And I say, "No, I'm not rich.
Yeah.
Not by any stretch of the imagination. My parents didn't give me stuff." Well, I mean, they took me on vacations. Sure, they bought my first laptop, but that was about the extent of it. I never grew up in a charmed life. I mean, sure, I'm not technically on paper working class because both my parents are teachers and we're middle class income, but we're in so much debt that we might as well be working class without having our times of going short on food and whatnot. But point is, it's like, are you rich? It's like, what the hell question is that?
Yeah,
as if poor people couldn't possibly have an objection to the Democrat or just the leftist narrative in general.
Yeah. Oh, there's tons wrong with it, but I mean, when you have a worldview that's as simplistic as, well, they have to be rich, they have to be evil, and they have to be white, or one of those things in order to be a Republican.
Or male.
Yeah, that doesn't read to me, this person has thought this out, this person has seen the other side, and come to this conclusion. That reads to me, they've been fed this for a very long time, and it's incredibly difficult to bring them away from that, even when they're looking at a prime example that they're wrong, or these preconceived notions are wrong, and they still can't grasp their minds around it. They go, well, I mean, he's got to be something else. And it just blows my mind every time I get into this conversation with leftist or somebody that's really never met a conservative.
Or at least a minority conservative like us.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, this is actually a perfect segue into the question segment. The intro was a little long, guys. Sorry. Isaac's a good friend of mine, so we love to chat it up. Ha, insert joke here. As I will make custom in most of these, I give people a warning. Because I intend to have not only everyday people that I know, online people I know, but also high-profile people, some of whom I have contact with, like actual direct contact with. And I now ask you to take this pledge. You now stand on trial before the judges of the World Wide Web. No lie is safe. Nothing is sacred. And nothing is beyond its reach. Anything you have ever said or done can and will be used against you in the public sphere. As such, you must be prepared to defend and justify yourself and your worldview. Do you accept these terms, Isaac Victor Yepez?
I accept.
All right, thank you. We may now proceed. I'll probably do this in like an epic voiceover in the future.
Sounds good.
Alrighty, so on this track, so tell me, what made you a conservative, and what makes you want to stay conservative?
So, oh man, it was a long journey, I think, because of course, a lot of circles that I used to hang around were always very liberal, and I come from a fiscally conservative household. My parents really never talked about politics with me, but I went into accounting and economics. Always made sense to me in high school, so I would listen to their points, and socially I was like, yeah, leave the government out of my life, I don't care. But when they started talking about economic policies, I was like, no, this doesn't work. Like, it won't work. It never has worked. It never will work. And that always kind of put me in a gray area with Democrats, because I was willing to agree with the socially libertarian parts, but when it came to their really never worked in its fucking lifetime, spoiler, like 1 million people are going to die because of this implementation.
Under one such example, Mao Zedong, and this is just him, he maxes out the death count at 100 million, just saying.
Yeah, the low estimates, I think 40 million. So you're still in the millions.
Tens of millions.
Yeah, the tens of millions. But, imagine raising an army like that in Lord of the Rings. But we would always get into these arguments, like, well, how come you don't believe in higher taxes, and how come this, and you don't want these programs? And it's like, because entitlement programs are cancer. They literally function like cancer. They just grow and grow and grow. You can't really stop it. You can slow it down, maybe even halt its aggressive progress into your society for a few years if you're lucky, but eventually it's going to grow again.
Wasn't there a Ronald Reagan quote that went something like, and I'm paraphrasing here, so apologize, that it's easier to start a new government program than it is to kill one, a pre-existing one?
If it's not a quote of his, that should probably be...
he said something like that.
Yeah, it should probably be an axiom of government, because, there's just not many programs that get cut entirely, especially ones that I think are inflated. But, so I always disagreed with this, and then the whole... What first started turning me away was I dated a feminist. And this girl was like intersectional before I knew what intersectional meant.
Oh gosh.
And she was like radical and all this stuff. I just thought she was hot. So, and before we got into those discussions,
you let your other head do the talking.
Yes, I'm sorry, but she was very intelligent, always top of her class and whatnot. And so she was Pakistani, or no, not Pakistan, Palestinian. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure. I think she was a secular Muslim.
Probably. Those are the only ones that become feminists anyway.
Yeah.
The third wavers anyway.
So she's talking about like rape culture, and I was like, what the fuck is rape culture? And like all this stuff, and I was just like, okay, I'm not smart enough to pick away at these arguments, but I know something's wrong here. Like, this doesn't make sense, because we were talking about holding hands one time, and she was like, yeah, that's part of rape culture because it's possessive or something like that. And I was like, that's ridiculous, and then she was like, well, she always had to make it a point to let everybody know that she was a feminist. And I said, what's the point of doing that? Everyone's already on your side. And she goes, no, they're not, like, not in government. And I said, if you keep demonizing the people the way that you are and alienating people from your cause, you're not going to win anyone over. I didn't realize how prophetic that was until a few years down the line, where I was like, yeah, you're fucked as a movement. And I wasn't ready to say I'm not a liberal until I got stabbed. That was when I went as far right-wing as you can go, in about the 10 months that I was recovering. Because, I felt sorry for myself, people felt sorry for me, I had, like, all this victim credit, but it just wasn't good. Like, I didn't have motivation to do anything. I kind of wanted to just curl up in a ball and die, because I thought my arm was going to be useless for the rest of my life. And I thought I was going to have all these health problems, but it turned out it wasn't. Thank fuck. And my dad said, you need to get out and do something. Like, this is crippling you. You're crippling yourself. And at that point, something clicked in my head. I was like, hey, this is actually really wrong. Like, why am I doing this? The only way I'm going to get out of this is if I do it myself. And so that's what I did. And I just haven't really looked back since, as far as, like, should I go back to liberalism? No. And what keeps me wanting to stay an active conservative is the radicals on the left have been very abrasive. And that talk that we did with Dr. Jordan B. Peterson back on November 1st of last year, that guy solidified my political involvement. After that, I was just completely inspired. And I remember he said, you're in the fight of your lives right now. You may not realize it, but it's happening. And at that point, I was just like, yeah, this is, the way I got to go.
Well, it's interesting too because it was that first of the unfiltered lecture series. It's a pity we never recorded that one because it was really good, especially with how much I've come to love Dr. Peterson and have been watching more of his things. It was. I'd always known that there was something very sinister plaguing the left, but I could never quite put my finger on it. I could tell this was some sort of ideological zealotry, but I could never place my finger on where did this come from? When did the left stop being, or was it ever classically liberal like it claims to be? If it was liberal, it wouldn't care. But these aren't liberals, these are progressives. Mm-hmm. And Dr. Peterson mentioned one little buzzword that I had actually started to hear around the time, which was cultural Marxism. And I actually found a documentary on YouTube. It's been somewhat discredited by people as being a little bit conspiratorial, and I can kind of see some parts of it are, but it introduced me to the Frankfurt School. Yep. And its introduction of such things as critical theory. Basically, stop me if I'm wrong, since you've had your dealings with critical theory. Is it pretty much just, if you thought it was bad, start finding ways that it's good, and if it's good, start finding ways that it's bad? Is that basically what critical theory is? The art of criticizing everything you thought you knew for the explicit purpose of relativizing everything.
Yes, that's exactly it. And I think the worst part about it is they're like, well, what's so good about traditionalism whenever you get into that topic with critical theorists? And you're like, well, it built what we have now. And they go, no, well, it has all these negative ramifications and all these negative, what's the word?
Side effects.
Yeah, side effects. I got repercussions. And like it's damaging to men and women, and I always just think to myself, if it's damaging to both men and women, how are we progressing to making our society more advanced as we go along?
More just, more advanced, more nuanced, more understanding. Yeah, and when Dr. Peterson mentioned this, and I started researching into it, and then interestingly enough, one of Sargon of Akkad's videos, I'm also a fan. He played like end clips from a 1984 interview with former KGB officer Yuri Bezmenov, and it talked about how the Soviets in other countries that they had ambassadors with, like India, South America, etc., would propagandize them, starting with education. Softly introduce Marxism, critical theory, into academia to make people more open to the Soviet concepts of social justice. And he even used Yuri Bezmenov, and this is from 1984, over 30 years ago, using the expression social justice. It was the craziest, most prophetic thing I had ever seen. Talking about how Marxism, it didn't work economically, and as time went on, people began to realize they lost the economic argument, and workers were not interested. So they decided to take it to cultural extents. I mean, yeah, that's when I realized, this all makes sense now. And as I watched Dr. Peterson, he explained it better, that this movement that solidified social justice were the postmodernists. They took, whereas modernism strove for one singular objective truth through scientific inquiry, through testing, through experimentation, postmodernism said, oh, well, everyone brings their own biases to the discussion table, therefore, and there's also multiple ways to read into things or interpret art or literature, so therefore, one single objective truth does not exist, therefore the only thing that's sort of truth to you is your group identity. It's sort of around the same time period as you. This election cycle is what woke me up to. I was knew the left was malicious, but never to the extent that I'm seeing them for now.
Yeah, and I think something to the point you're making here is when you look at J.K. Rowling's Twitter account.
Oh, dear Lord. Dear Lord!
If you want to take a trip down the rabbit hole, there you go. Yesterday, she had posted something. I think it was from the Telegraph or maybe the Guardian, but it said now 1/3 of suspected terrorists in the UK are white. And so people were like, oh, look at this. It's just crazy. See, hateful white people. They're all following Donald Trump's rhetoric. It's like, really? I mean, even if that were so, the UK is 87 or 88% white. So shouldn't it be 87% or more are suspected white terrorists? Like, how are they so blatantly disregarding this other 2/3? So if anything, that 1/3 is heavily unrepresentative of the population. And so I mean, everybody that I brought this up to, they blocked me immediately. And there was one guy who argued with me for a bit, and I mean, he seemed to mean well. Eventually he apologized for condescending or whatever, but he was like, it was interesting seeing your point of view. And I said, it's nice that we're having this discussion, because in the classroom I get shut down. As soon as I push my professor into a corner, it's, oh, let's move on, or like, let's not talk about that.
Oh, this conversation bores me. Let's move on.
Yeah, so that's why I think the way to connect with these people is not going to be with facts, because they'll just block you, or they just won't listen to you, or they'll shut you down, as you've seen at in-person events. But the way to do it is talk to them in their terms.
Yeah.
Terms that they'll understand, and use their reasoning and flip it on its head. That's the best way you can stop them in their tracks and make them think for a second. Because if you get hostile with them, trust me, they will not want to hear what you have to say, and you might turn them off, forever.
Yeah, exactly. So my next question is, as a fellow Hispanic conservative of Mexican ancestry, what makes you hate illegal immigration?
So I think there's, it's quite a few things. One is it inevitably drives down the market value of labor, especially at the lowest rungs of the ladder, which is confusing for me when I see liberals virtue signaling about illegal immigration. Oh, nobody's illegal, let them in, let them in, let them in. Oh, it's easy for you to say that. Both your parents have professional jobs, or, you're already a 6-year degree student or something like that. And you're never going to have to worry about having to work at a McDonald's, or doing odd jobs, or, mowing somebody's lawn, or being a gardener for somebody, because you're going to live in this ivory tower, or at least something resembling that bubble.
Gated community.
Yeah. And it's the people at the bottom who don't have time to have a voice in this discussion that they claim that they care about, who are getting the brunt of this. And furthermore, it shows liberal elitism at work, where, oh, the poor black people, the poor black people, the poor brown people, but when it comes to white people, it's, oh, they're trailer trash, they make fun of them, they make fun of their accents. It's like, these are the poor people and uneducated people that you're always talking about. Why does it suddenly change when they don't have enough melanin in their skin? And another thing is, it's a slap in the face to those that do it correctly. And I know that's probably become a platitude to anybody that is on the outside listening in. But, I mean, if you go through this process for years and you pay into the system, and then somebody just like has a cousin that works at a shop, and you get in that way, and they can just pay you under the table for however long, what is that saying to everybody? It's undermining the law. It's like, when they make the family argument, oh, what about their families? Well, they broke the law, didn't they? We still prosecute thieves.
We still put people in jail, and that breaks up families.
Yeah, and it's just like, you wouldn't not prosecute thieves, murderers, rapists, any of those people, because, oh, well, what about their family? And that's a ridiculous argument, I think. And to try to postulate that, it's insulting to my intelligence. You think you can just make an emotional argument and I'm going to fall for it? And what they need to understand is, in order for an emotional argument to work, or a shaming tactic to work, they have to assume that I give a fuck about their feelings, and I don't. I will laugh in their face, and I've done it. When Governor Abbott came into town, when they were shouting at me traitor and all that. Oh, I went right up to their faces and laughed at them, and nothing pisses off the left more than when you mock them.
Oh, exactly. Probably what irritates me the most, besides those, is that some people don't realize, and the left doesn't seem to realize, is that these illegal immigrants, let's call them what they actually are, they're refugees. Mexico is a hellhole, and my family's, I like to say maybe middle class, maybe upper class, I don't know, living in Chihuahua, so I'd like to think somewhat safe. But even they've been robbed at gunpoint before. And the thing is, everybody knows that no politician in Mexico is straight because they've got a gun to their backs.
Yep.
That or they're being paid off, still with the threat of a gun to their back. So the fact of the matter is, Mexico, we can't fix Mexico. They need to fix themselves. And the reason why there's a double standard, Mexico has a giant-ass southern wall, huge, well fortified. They deport more illegal immigrants to their country than we do with ours. And yet they not only have no problem with, but they advocate for a porous border on our side, their northern border. Why is that? Because they see that as a pressure release valve. So long as they don't fix things, they are under threat by their poorest and their most desperate of a violent revolution, an uprising of the people. So what does a border filled with holes mean for them? Pressure release valve. They just run up here to America. Boom. Revolution averted. Mexico will never improve. They have no incentive to improve. And for them, heck, why bother? These illegal immigrants are always sending money back to Mexico. Remittances. Yep. It's insane. And here's the thing. I don't think it's fair to necessarily judge the illegal immigrants themselves, but rather the Mexican government. Because it's the Mexican government who's actually actively aided and abetted these illegals. They'll give them pamphlets saying, the best ways to dodge the border patrol. Oh, here are water stations. Oh, here are weak spots. Oh, this time of day, we'll pick you up here. And it's like, it's exploiting us. It's Mexico's government exploiting us, when what they really need is the whole world standing in front of them, pointing their fingers at them and saying, go get yourself in order. That's what irritates me most about this. Is not, and don't get me wrong, I've noticed here on the border that illegal immigrants tend to be much less refined people than legal ones. I speak from experience, but I'd say the government situation is what irritates me more. Not social consequences, sure, but the larger picture is what's the most disgusting thing about it.
Yeah, I think what's very telling about this is, again, they're even changing the rhetoric to try and make people accept it. Well, they're undocumented.
I hate the word undocumented.
Yeah, if they were undocumented, that would mean that they're waiting in line to be documented.
It sounds like a database discrepancy.
Yeah, and it's just, and when they attack things at the very base, at language, that's when we've lost. Is when they get to say, this is how we dictate the way the conversation goes. We get to choose the language. We get to choose, the buzzwords. We get to choose on what grounds we speak. We get to pick and choose who we argue against. Who gets filtered in and out of the mainstream media when they're making cogent arguments. We say, oh, you know what? No, that sounds too good. Get them out. And so, I think there's just no solving this, especially now since it seems that President Trump is turning away from his original campaign rhetoric. He's what was it? He's continuing Obama's plan for the Dreamers.
Yeah, I actually read about that. And on that note, what are your brief thoughts on Donald Trump and his performance thus far? I think you and me as Trump supporters probably have a lot of interesting things to say about this, but I'm curious how you view the God Emperor.
You know, I'm a little disappointed that he hasn't maintained his anti-social justice rhetoric. He hasn't been a hardline about it. I can see the value in kind of I guess capitulating some things to the left. You know, he needs to get work done, so he has to do it. But I really wanted somebody to stand in there and say no more. You know, it ends here.
Like, for example, that whole affirmative action thing for like women in STEM.
Yes,
like that thing.
Oh God, the Trudeau deal. That one was that one was hard to swallow, honestly. And what's crazy about it is a lot of the young right was pissed about this, but the left almost had no awareness of it.
They had nothing to say about it. They made no big deal about it. Trump just put forth a feminist's dream come true, at least, smaller dream.
Yeah.
About, the government has a program is now beginning a program to encourage women to go into STEM. They didn't say anything about it.
Yeah.
It just sort of came and went, and I'm surprised that the right isn't making more of a stink about it either.
Yeah, well, I think what's happening right now is it's a macrocosm of what just happened at Shakespeare at the Park. You see the right divided into two parts: the partisan side and the principled side. The partisan side is saying, don't criticize him, we need to get him through right now.
the cult of personality.
Yes,
basically.
we need to win. Winning is more important. And although I can sympathize with some of that sentiment, ultimately I have to side with the principled conservatives, because they're the ones saying, no, this is exactly what we hated about Obama. This is exactly what we hated about Clinton. Why are we doing this now? And I think what some of the partisans are going through is they see that they have no power in the mainstream media. They see that they have no power in Hollywood. They see that they have no power in academia. So they're saying, we have to take every win that we can get and claw whoever's face we have to get it. And I don't know. I don't want to go down that road and not criticize the president, whether he's the guy I voted for or not, because, the value of his social and political successes could outweigh the bad that he's doing.
Yeah, it hasn't been easy for me either. I mean, honestly, as far as I'm concerned, he's done an all-around good job. I'm proud to have voted for him. I can't say that I regret voting for him yet, but I can definitely criticize him on a few things. That feminist capitulation being one of them.
Or when he recently used that Syrian child to justify another incursion in the Middle East.
The Syria situation I find interesting, because I don't know what his military advisors told him. I don't know what he knows. But I do think that the Syria maneuver, the missile strike, if it remains a standalone act, I think it was a stroke of genius. But if it becomes another foreign intervention, I will be deeply disappointed in the president, which I have not been thus far. I've been disappointed in him over a few, minor things, but the biggest thing for me would be the foreign intervention thing. And I think what the most enraging thing about that would be, it wouldn't be coming from Trump himself. It would be coming from his advisors. Your Nikki Haley's, who are your old warmongering neoconservatives who are still up there in the cabinet. And it doesn't help that his daughter is trying to have an influence on him when she's a progressive leftist. She's a feminist. She believes in rape culture. She believes in the gender pay gap. She believes in a borderless world. And yeah, it's like you've heard of some of what Ivanka Trump has espoused, right?
Yeah.
In interviews. It's funny for people who don't know. Donald Trump has been a lifelong Democrat. His own family couldn't vote for him in the primaries because they were registered Democrats. And some of his family members still clearly have those Democrat sentiments. They're from New York. What do you expect? And there was talk that there was like this power play within the Trump administration to push Steve Bannon out of influence. What do you think about that?
The whole Trump is Steve Bannon's puppet, or which part of that do you mean?
I guess the place of Steve Bannon in the Trump administration, because what we sort of younger conservatives liked about Bannon was that he understood what conservative youth were seeing. He saw the problems. He worked for Breitbart. Breitbart is much more attuned to younger conservatives.
Yeah.
They know our struggles. They know our pains. They're not out of touch yet, even though they could very well become someday. But as far as I'm concerned, Breitbart's, for the most part, got its thumb on the pulse just right. Yeah, but what are your thoughts on like this sort of move to push Steve Bannon out of influence in favor of the globalists, as your libertarians would say?
Well, I think they see the value of Bannon to the right. And that's why they need to get him out of there. Because they see, well, so far, the implementation of his strategies, his rhetoric, has been working. It's been connecting with people. Now he's got a bunch of diehard youngsters following him, and, they're probably going to be part of that 28% that's just unmovable. And they think if we can tear him down, this Trump administration, it's going to be a lame duck one. And I cannot see that happen, because they've already been doing everything possible to make Trump look bad. And don't get me wrong, sometimes he makes himself look bad, and it pains me to admit that, but it happens. Nobody's perfect, and it would help if he were a little less abrasive sometimes, or at least not so much of an obnoxious speaker. But it happens, and this is the guy we got. This is the guy we needed, I think. And if they take down Bannon, then everything that Trump fought so hard against, Bannon is basically, his removal is going to take away from that. It's
significantly.
Yeah, and then we're just going to look spineless again.
Yeah, exactly. We elected a warrior, but if the establishment Republicans get their way, we'll get a wimp.
Yeah, and that's what bothers me the most about the establishment right wing, is they seem to work really well with the left. Whenever we have somebody that looks like he's gonna make a real difference,
the populist reformer.
Yes, the establishment seems to work hand in hand every single time with the left and go, let's tear him down. I saw Gavin McInnes tweeted out the other day, funny definition of breakneck speed, and it was the Y2K thing. Like, after 17 years of the Y2K protocol being in place, they finally removed it, and then Congress was complaining about having to move at the pace of a disruptor like Trump. And it was like, yeah, you guys are finally having to do your jobs. Sorry. I think most of you shouldn't have jobs, but whatever.
Insert Nigel Farage quote here. I'm aware that most of you haven't worked a proper job in your lives.
Yes. Yeah, oh, absolutely.
Yeah, that guy's a boss.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Alrighty. So the next question is, what do you feel is the legitimate function of government, and how much of a hand should it have in our lives?
So, this is a difficult question to answer, because it's going to piss a lot of people off. Especially if any of this gets out to someone like Adam Kokesh, or even that guy T.
Oh boy. Oh boy.
I'm fans of both of them, but I do believe that border security is imperative, and some socialization is necessary. You do need your roads, you do need your public water system. You do need your electrical grids. You do need certain things to be provided for by a bigger bureaucracy, because if you have private companies doing this, well, eventually the best one's always going to rise, and they can just gouge people.
Oh, exactly. You know? Like I was even told that the video game BioShock is apparently follows the whole ANCAP, utopia to its logical end.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, having the government be that monopoly isn't all that great either, but there can be private companies within that system, and there's always going to be a price control on government, because people can say, hey, you're actually beholden to me. Well, at least in America, they could say, you're beholden to me, I'm not going to fucking pay this.
FedEx.
yeah, do your job or somebody else will. And I just don't like the idea of big government and big corporation going hand in hand together until we're all paying out the ass just to live. And some might complain we're already doing that now, but I live pretty comfortably, and I'm not working 18 hours a day. Hell, most of the time I'm not even working 8 hours a day. It's like 6, 7 here and there. But I think international security is also a thing. There needs to be a military, because if you have nice things, people will want to take those nice things.
Exactly. Somebody has to have the monopoly on force to not only secure you, but to enforce the rule of law. Period.
Yeah.
You can't rely on on all people to adhere to the non-aggression principle, as good a principle as it is.
Yeah, and then a nationalized currency and a nationalized law system. I think those are definitely fair. Of course, when you get to local stuff, the police officers will enforce different laws depending on what demographics they're dealing with and what crimes they're looking at in what proportions. But generally, I think, the government, their involvement is definitely necessary. It's currency, borders, military, law, and certain public systems that everybody uses. But beyond that, after that, I get into a gray area. I go, well, how much is too much? I think we were talking about this, I think last week. The implementation of the Great Society was, I think, one of the worst things that ever happened to America in our history. I don't like the idea of a federalized education system as it is, and I don't like the idea of, well, let's pump more money into it, because when you have...
Has it worked?
Yeah, especially...
Has it worked? Go watch Stefan Molyneux, man. He talks about this stuff all the time. Pumping more money into these systems does not work.
Yeah, and it's just like... I can't understand why you would have anyone, that has no idea what you're living with. Like in El Paso, why would you have people in D.C. who've never been to Texas, let alone El Paso, Texas? Why would you have them deciding what your curriculum needs to be?
Exactly. And even then you see this Common Core stuff, and the history is just propaganda. The math is... I can't even talk about it because it's like... Ugh.
Oh, well, that's how they do it. I hate using him as an example, but Hitler did this very well. Because let's make the education system ours, and let all the chips fall where they may, or where we intend them to, and it worked beautifully.
Yeah, there is a way to do it, but that doesn't mean that it's ethical.
Yeah, and I really do not like federalized education, and not everybody belongs in college. I don't think even a majority of people belong in college. I think maybe a plurality, but generally, I think probably 1 in 4 people going to college is probably too many. I might be an asshole for that, but just a lot of people aren't cut out for it, and now that it's practically free to go, it's just a waste of time and money. And now we're inflating the system, and the cream of the crop aren't always floating to the top anymore.
No, not with affirmative action in place.
Yeah, and so now we have people with worthless degrees, and they go, why are these degrees worthless? Oh, because too many people have them. Well, why do too many people have them? Because of the government programs that you wanted. And they go, oh, well, the government's great. And then you have people like Bernie Sanders like, oh, the government needs a whole workover. And then it's like, so you think the makeover is going to be giving them more money? Like, how does that work in someone's head, you know?
No kidding, man. I mean, studying business and also being involved with network marketing, interestingly enough, has actually taught me that, you know what? School is almost useless these days. Unless you're going into a hard STEM subject, a specialized business subject, or like an art, like you're like an art school, you know, don't even bother. Do not even bother, because otherwise you are just wasting your time. If you can believe this, even the market for lawyers is oversaturated. Yes, you know how people point to the whole doctors and lawyers as being like the secure quote unquote jobs. Well, even lawyers are not secure anymore. They can't find work. You're having lawyers working at McDonald's. It's a sad situation.
Jesus.
Yeah, I could go on about that, but alrighty. So now we're going to get a little more personal here with this question. Now, you, Isaac, you're an atheist. You've made that no secret. I'm a born-again Christian. I've made no secret of that. Mm-hmm. It's interesting how well with chemistry we have, despite our despite that ideological difference of ours. But what do you believe the purpose of religion should be in society, especially since we're seeing Western civilization crumble with the loss of its traditional Protestant Christian ideals? You know, I ask this in light of more and more atheist public figures like Dave Cullen, Naked Ape, Stefan Molyneux, you know, warming up to Christians again.
Well, I'm not sure what the role should be, but I think what it does very well is it stabilizes the nation, and it grows the nation, because you're given these values. Okay, it's man and wife. Why do you need man and wife? So you can procreate. Why do you procreate? So you can grow as a society. And, you know, don't murder. Well, why not? Well, because that's one less possible convert that you could have. And when you have a religion that's pretty much, you know, national, you have a homogenous society. And I think that's a huge problem that the left has with accepting. They always say, oh, well, we need to be multicultural. No, we don't, actually. That's actually the last thing we need to be. We can be multiracial, which I think they sometimes substitute and interchange. I'm not really sure. But
it definitely seems to be a problem of both the social justice left and the alt-right. They seem incapable of separating race from culture.
Yeah, and you can have a multiracial society, and it's perfectly fine. But they need to be culturally homogenous, and one of the ways you do that is with religion. Now, I mean, I'm an atheist, but I definitely wouldn't side with the Muslims anytime soon. And I think what they're doing right now is, because they're so far behind culturally, I mean, just like fucking like 1,000 years behind, they're doing exactly what a religion's golden age is supposed to do. They're infiltrating other cultures, slowly turning them into assimilating them.
Or at least outbreeding their native populations.
Yes. And spreading their faith by violent means, by nefarious means, by malevolent means, however they can. And as a result, you know, they always boast, oh, well, Islam is the fastest growing religion. Well, it's not for the reasons they think.
It's like my dad said whenever this comes up, that Islam is the fastest growing religion. My dad adds this little caveat. It's the world's fastest growing enforced religion. Christianity may be the largest, but that's not because it's compulsory.
Yeah.
It's because it just resonates with more people. If Islam were to compete on its own, I think it's safe to say that it would not survive well in its current state in the marketplace of religion.
Oh, yeah, well, I mean, if you read the Quran, the musings of Muhammad and the multiple forgers that got into his book, I mean, he couldn't even read, so his child wife had to write it for him. But, yeah, they're just psychopathic, and a lot of them are just ridiculous. There's one part where he rides to paradise on like a half llama or half camel, half lion, half woman thing. It's like a man bear pig. I'm not really sure. It's been a couple years since I've read it, but I mean, a lot of this stuff, it's laughable, and I think that even though all of this is laughable, they're still a force to be reckoned with, for sure. Like I said, I think they're in their golden age right now because they are spreading incredibly fast. There's almost no country that doesn't have any, and they have such an insulated system that it's impenetrable. Every couple days now, there's a new terror incident. Just today in Brussels, there was a suicide bomber. Thank God they shot him in time, but yeah, it's just all the time now, and the global index of terrorism, it doesn't look good.
No.
So,
last summer in Europe, it was one terror attack a day, like in the European Union. It was bad. Last summer was bad. I mean, this summer is bad.
Yeah, but to get back to the question, I think the role of religion in a society is definitely to stabilize and to grow a society and to help it thrive.
I'd agree with you there, and to throw in a little bit of Christian perspective that I've noticed again a lot of these same atheists and agnostics talk about is that there was a certain uniqueness to the Protestant sect of Christianity that was never found in the Catholic or Orthodox sects. The Protestants broke away from the long-standing Christian tradition of the rulers are appointed by God, therefore you should pray for them but not attempt to oppose them. Mm-hmm. The three main groups were Martin Luther in Germany, John Calvin in France, and King Henry VIII in England. Martin Luther particularly was tired of the Catholic Church teaching heretical things and being given no room to question any of it. So what do? He broke away from the Catholic Church, left his 95 Theses on the door, and took his followers, and they became the Lutherans. The Anglican Church, same thing. It was King Henry VIII. He had his own reasons. John Calvin had his own reasons. But I think it was the American Revolution that solidified it, that the whole concept of Protestant work ethic. And if you were to really read the Bible, God never called, the Judeo-Christian God, in New Testament times, never calls for a theocracy. Now, some Christians may want one, but God never advocated for it. And something most people don't know is that after the Israelites had been led to their new homeland, which became Israel, the Israelites begged for a king. They begged for a king because everyone else had one, and God repeatedly told them, "No, I'm not going to give you a king, because if I do, he'll usurp his authority and taint my word. He'll think and claim to speak for me." Eventually, God said, "Okay, fine, I'll give you what you wanted, and I'll let that take its logical course." And Israel's history is history. And even Jesus, people say, he was a liberal, he was a hippie, he was a communist, he was a socialist. He was none of those things. He was a man of principle who lived on his own, never married. He was, as per Christian interpretation, the Son of God made flesh. But he was asked repeatedly, especially by the religious leaders who kept trying to get him with aha questions, about government, because at the time Israel was under the dominion of Rome. Rome had. You could therefore argue that the authority of Caesar was illegitimate. It was illegitimately acquired. One time they asked him, "Prophet, you speak great words. So tell us, is it against our laws to pay taxes to Caesar?" Now, this was a very good question and got people riled up. And he said, "Okay, fine. Show me a denarius, a Roman silver coin." And he asks the crowd, "Whose name and face do you see on this coin?" And they all said, "Caesar." And he said, "Then give unto Caesar that which is Caesar's, and unto God that which is God's." He set the precedent that it's possible to serve both God and government, that they didn't have to be served simultaneously, or that the government had to be theocratic whatsoever. If anything, I'd argue that Jesus was kind of a libertarian. especially if you read like Romans 14, which talks about how every Christian's walk with God is individual. I'm not kidding. Romans 14 has to be one of the most pluralistic passages I've ever read. It says things like all things are permissible, but not all things are beneficial. So one man might see one day as holier than the rest. The other may see all days as equal. Don't disparage each other for your differences. One may believe in being a vegan, that eating animals is wrong. Then for that man it is wrong. One man believes that it's okay to eat everything, which is true. It's okay for him to eat everything. But don't you dare disparage one another or cause one another to slip over these petty differences. If it's wrong, if it's wrong to you, then it is wrong for you. And I'd like to think that Protestant Christianity brought back that true sense of individualism that the church had not seen. And if it wasn't for Protestant Christianity, because the Catholic Church is bureaucratic, it's a centralized church body, I don't think Western civilization would have ever materialized. At least in a principles sense. Yeah. But yeah, I do agree with your ascertainment that religion, call it opiate of the masses all you want, it produces homogenous societies who are all on the same page. Is it illusion? Maybe. But I don't know. Makes life generally pretty good, so long as the faith's not barbaric like Islam.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's sort of my Christian take on it. And speaking of, as a Christian, I've always associated the loss of a God figure in society with the increasing destruction of society from within. Do you think that postmodernism was the inevitable result of modernism's insistence on breaking with Christianity for the sake of objectivity? That maybe some people just didn't want to live by any rule, so they twisted modernism's insistence on, quote-unquote, searching for the truth without religion, to then become, oh, well, everyone's biased at the debate forum, so there isn't any absolute truth at all, so do whatever the hell you want and don't judge me.
So, I think postmodernism is, I guess, the runt of the litter's protest against modernists. Well, we couldn't debate them on their grounds, objective, rational, so we had to make our own.
Mm-hmm.
Because, if you look at the spaces that postmodernists occupy, they're not taken seriously most of the time by hard scientists or really by anybody except those that have been indoctrinated. There was that second scandal, the societal complex penis or something, that paper. It was
wasn't that a 4chan thing?
I can't remember, but they published it.
Yeah, it was an obvious hoax just to see if they publish it, and they did.
Yeah, and they've done this before. I forgot the other guy's name, but he did this, I think, back in the 90s, where he just wrote postmodernist garbage, just had it vomit upon itself, and they were like, "This is brilliant! It's so profound, I can't understand it." So they published it, and I honestly think that, when you're the 99th out of 100, you're gonna go with postmodernism, because at that point everyone sounds smart, because what is smart?
Being able to use big flourishy words.
Yes, and whose argument can be truly righteous, as long as you can keep your bullshit consistent. Even if you're black or brown, you don't even have to do that much. As long as you can just keep doubling down harder and harder and harder on your arguments, you can make it in this field. And I don't think it was inevitable. Maybe it was inevitable, but I think it took a really petty mind to create it, because I just don't see the merit in it at all. All it does is halt dialogue. It halts intellectual discussion, and it places a ban on intellectual rigor and growth of the mind. It's just you can argue yourself into a circle in about half an hour using postmodernist theory or critical theory, and I mean, sure, it can be fun to kind of play sandbox with it, but as an actual exercise, no. What worth is it? You know, what inherent value does it have? And it doesn't have any. And I think that's what's so difficult about debating critical theorists and postmodernists, is all of their terms are so nebulous and so just, I mean, foreign to people that you can't understand them most of the time. And if you can understand them, the terms are so vague that you can't really argue against it.
Hetero, cis, normative.
Yeah.
All these words.
And I think that's what the problem is. And kind of the best thing to do is to just troll them. That's the only way to show how ridiculous they are, and then the masses will stop taking it seriously. Because sure, it sounds great when you say, you know, you're a transnormative, cisphobic, something, whatever. But once you break down what they're saying and take a second to breathe, you know, it's just garbage.
No, it really is. Yeah, I'd ask that because, you know, again, this is where my Christian perspective comes in. I had always seen, like when you're a kid, you know, atheists are dicks.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
They really are. They just are. You know, they disparaged Christians nonstop. It was the bullying got so bad in middle school and even parts of high school. Not gonna lie, but it almost seemed that, you know, growing up, and thank God, you know, I see differently now. It always seemed like atheists just wanted to be able to do whatever without a guilty conscience. So what they would do is just get rid of God and claim, oh, God's just, you know, superstition. You know, I'm gonna rely on science, and because there's no God, you know, I can do whatever I want.
Well, I've gotta stop you there. It wasn't that intelligent.
What's up?
The thought process behind being a dick as a young atheist.
They thought themselves smart people.
Oh no, exactly, they did. But so a lot of this social justice garbage that you see nowadays, they think they're contrarian. They think they're going against the grain. No, you are the grain. You know. So with atheism, I think you see that in the early stages. They're always told, oh well, Christianity is the dominant faith. It's everybody is, and blah 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 blah. But if you're an atheist, it makes you smarter. It makes you, you know,
because you can question.
Yeah.
You can be a skeptic.
You're a scientist.
Trademark.
And all this stuff. And so a lot of them believe themselves to be tearing down the establishment somehow. And it's just like, oh, well, that's interesting. And, you know, like, you're not, of course, but that's exactly why they won't attack Muslims. Because they don't see them as the establishment.
Yeah, exactly.
And furthermore, they've been given this racial, you know, these racial degrees in which to judge people. Oh, well, they don't fit the color wheel that they've designed. So they think, oh, well, they're given a pass because they're not establishment. Their beliefs are even, you know, more ridiculous when you put them side by side. It's, you believe in a llama lady? What?
What is that?
Yeah.
I mean, the Bible never had anything that crazy.
Yeah, it's just like you go to heaven and you don't have a butthole anymore. What is this? and so, you know, and the 72 virgins are supposed to be hot. Like, this doesn't make any sense. And you know, and they're not 9. I think that's something that most Muslims would be pissed off if they found out that their 72 virgins aren't 9 years old. They'd be like, that's a woman? Oh, you know, come on. Yeah, I don't want that.
Hoping for a prepubescent.
Yeah, like she has boobs already? Gross.
Yeah, pedophilia seems to be a problem in the Muslim world.
And rampant homosexuality.
Yes, that is the very interesting thing, homosexuality. Especially pedophilic homosexuality.
Yeah.
I for the life of me don't know why.
Oh, the poor boys over there.
Oh,
but
gosh.
yeah, I think that's the atheists. They're not as smart as you're making them out to be. It's just that they think they're being edgy. They think they're being anti-establishment by being dicks to what they see as the establishment.
And a lot of them did clearly mature and realize that, hey, we Christians aren't all a bunch of backwards bigots. You know, we Christians had our enlightenment. You know,
Yeah.
we understand science and objectivity. In fact, Christians invented more than half of everything scientific. But, you know, I have to wonder, would you say then that it was the permanently adolescent, degenerate atheists who ended up paving the way for postmodernism. That being said, because the mature atheists are the modernists. They're the ones who stress in singular objectivity. Would you say that it's not just the younger atheists, but also the ones who never quite grow up, and who become obsessed with their own degeneracy, that they just say, screw it, there is no truth because I don't want rules?
Yeah, the ones that are, I guess, suffering from arrested development. I'm not sure if I can really say that with any integrity, because I'm not sure how far down that whole complex goes. Honestly, I do think that there's something that must have happened to most of these people for them to just totally go the way that they're going. And I think the reason why you see so many white people that are on this social justice progressive left is because they've been fed this stuff for so long. Well, the only way you can repent for your whiteness is if you side with us.
You become an ally in their terms.
Yeah, and even then they get shit on anyway. But and it's just I think that it's not a coincidence. I think that it's definitely because they were either guilted into it, or they were given these really awful suppositions, and just laden with sophistry. And that sounded convincing, and nobody in that room was brave enough to speak up, so they didn't, and so that just became their narrative. And I mean, I can't even blame the teachers anymore, because when there's no professional or social consequence to indoctrinating the kids that you're teaching, why not?
Yeah, just go on ahead, truck on ahead is normal.
Yeah, there's absolutely no repercussions for this.
I know, it's insane. So, what are your thoughts on Dr. Jordan B. Peterson bringing religion back to the discussion table just when the skeptic community, as it's called, just when they thought religion was a solved issue? Religion's been debunked entirely, and here you have Dr. Peterson at the plate.
I think he's doing great with that. I think we definitely needed Christianity to make a comeback, especially with somebody that's such a legitimate intellectual. Mm-hmm. He's got his credentials, and he's opened up the minds of so many people. And now he's seen as, he's bringing back Christianity. He's making it, for lack of a better term, he's making it cool again. He's making it okay to be a Christian, and out in the open about it. Well, it's like, all Christians are dumb. Well, he is not. And I listened to the debate between Sam Harris and himself, and Sam Harris sounded like an angsty teenager trying to convince the Christian that he's wrong. And Dr. Peterson's there like, no, actually.
Oh man.
He's like, but don't you think, like, he goes, nope. And like it just continued on that way. And I think it's good that he came to the forefront and he's standing up for what he believes in religiously. Because I mean, this guy's got balls of steel. Holy shit. He's in the belly of the beast, and he does not give a fuck. But I mean, that's a man of integrity. And you're looking at this, and it's making it harder for social justice warriors to bring more people to their side, the more publicity that Dr. Jordan B. Peterson gets. Because, see, the skeptics are also atheists, most of them. Like, see, like, we're right on that too. It's just we're not racist. and then it's like, well, actually, no, this guy also disagrees with you on that point. And, maybe more of the closeted Christians out there are going to start coming out because of Dr. Jordan B. Peterson. And I think it's great what he's doing. I mean, obviously, like, I'm not religious myself, but I'm not an anti-theist. And so I think that's a big distinction that a lot of people don't really credit some atheists for. They just hear atheists and they think, they're just going to shit on religion. And that's one problem that I had with the skeptic community, is that they believed it was a solved issue, and it's like we're all in line about this one thing, and it's just like, okay, and you're saying we shouldn't be collectivist, right? Why can't people hold their own beliefs in terms of theocratic or theological instances? I mean, and that goes for Islam too. I think that these people should be able to just hold their own beliefs. It's just that they definitely need a reformation, because I wouldn't be so easy on Christianity if they were still murderous like they were every leftist dream, the Crusades,
Exactly.
Which they always describe as like, that was a defensive war. No, it wasn't, and whatever. But if Christianity was still a brutal religion, then I would say, I'd still be critical of them too and say they need reform, but they're not. And to say otherwise is just a false equivalency on its ass. And I think that the skeptic community wouldn't be so harsh on Muslims if there was a Muslim skeptic. I guarantee you they would not touch it.
Interesting point there.
Yeah, well, it's just like the Lacey Green thing. She's open to hear different ideas now. And so many people were praising her. And it's like, no, dude, she still has deeply regressive values and arguments. We still need to pressure her on this.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think the same goes for any SJW that comes over and says, okay, I'm not going to shut you down anymore, and I'm not going to block you out anymore. I'm going to listen. And that's great. Like, don't be hostile toward them, but keep the pressure on. And I think that would be it was lost on the skeptic community when Lacey Green went over, and then after a little while, Sargon and some others were like, no, she's still an SJW. She's just not as bad as the rest of them. And I think the same would go for a Muslim. They would all be like, oh, look, we finally have one. And then they go, but what about his ideas about, unbelievers and shit? And they go, well, I mean, I think that's kind of what would happen.
I don't know if the skeptic community as a whole is quite that cucked. I mean, Sargon definitely seemed to say, you know what, she is listening, but...
Yeah.
Like, I never heard one instance of him getting his hopes up about her views having changed. And to be honest, I follow several of the skeptic community members. I don't think I saw a single one of them hopeful that her views had changed, just that she's open to listen.
Yeah. I mean, maybe I'm just, like, hearing something that I want to hear or whatever, like a chink in the armor. But, I guess I'm talking about the comment sections where it's just like, oh, see.
The comments, okay.
Maybe. But
yeah, when I think skeptic community, I guess what I sort of think of is the high-profile figures.
Yeah.
You're Sargon of Akkad, you're Crowton T, you're V, you're Dave Cullen, you're Naked Ape, like these guys.
Well, I probably misspoke there, for sure.
I should have made the terminology a little more concise. This is going to be an interesting one, and one that I love having conversations with you about. What are your thoughts on communism, and what do we do about it?
I mean, do you want to know my real thoughts or like my public thoughts?
This is unfiltered, man. This is
man.
This is whatever you wish to say.
Oh, I'm gonna get in so much trouble if this ever gets out.
Dude, this is for Naked Ape, for Pete's sake.
Yeah. My thoughts on communism. It is Islam 2.0. It is twice as dumb, twice as violent, and twice as based in fantasy world. And I mean, you can argue with these people until you're blue in the face. You can even argue with them on their own terms. And it's like they're religious zealots. They just can't see any other way than their own. And it makes me think we need another Pinochet. I think, one to the neck in a football or in a soccer stadium is too nice. I think they should at least be put to work for once in their lives before they get executed, because they're just a detriment to society. I don't know if if there was a new nation that could be built, that constitution should have in it that, communism is punishable by death, because that is really the only way you can keep it from getting into your mainstream and infecting your best and your brightest. Because it would be unfair of me to say every communist is an idiot. No, I'm pretty sure some of these guys are very intelligent. In fact, listening to some of them debate, some of them are very intelligent. But they've been infected with this idea that you can deny people their human nature, and that you can have this utopia without any sort of law to help out and keep the peace, and without anybody that's going to be pissed off that you're taking their pre-existing property and redistributing it. And I think once you deny basic human nature in your argument, there's just no talking to you. You need to become airlifted shark food. I think that it's another religion, and it's the worst one of all.
Communism, I dare say, is very much a cult of death, because at the end of the day, how is communism enforced? By the sword, or in their case, by the bullet. Obviously nobody likes Adolf Hitler or the Nazis, but reading up on history, as I have been recently, I come to find out that the reason why Hitler hated the Jews so much specifically was that Germany, in its time of economic crisis, was seeing an influx of Eastern European communist Jews attempting to stage multiple revolutions against the government and barely being held off every single time. It was so bad that they had their own party, the Nazi Party, the National Bolshevik Party. So what was Hitler's response to this, as he was rising in fame? The National Socialist Party, the Nazi Party, saying, hey, we're not going to have anything to do with you dirty communists. You're destructive, you're violent. You use the media and newspapers to smear us German nationalists. Isn't that kind of crazy? This is I know the alt-right's probably jerking themselves off just listening to this. But no, hashtag not all Jews. I'm tired of this whole Jewish question thing, but I'm not going to act like it doesn't have some historical basis. But yeah, communism is a violent, I'd like to think, cult, and it will never try to institute itself peacefully once its numbers are great enough.
Yeah, well, I mean, it works a lot like Islam. Yeah, once their numbers are big enough, they start going off the handle too.
I know, it's crazy.
I just think that, and I mean, I do not like them. I mean, if it were up to me, there would be a purge tomorrow. Some people are like, thank God it's not up to you. Whatever. The world would be better for it, I think. And, but disregarding that, I would love to have them openly debate a high-profile person that disagrees with communism, just so that you can have their ideas out in the open, and maybe communists that are communists because their friends are, their Marxist professor told them to be, or something, but they're just impressionable young people. They can hear how stupid these ideas are out in the open, and they can hear one of their paladins just get fucking ass fucked, by a capitalist, and just like, oh, well, this doesn't, or even a biologist.
Well, yeah, it's crazy, like how the Soviets just denied human nature. They thought that they could socially reconstruct man. Stalin had his own vision for the Soviet man. It got so bad that there was a pseudoscience called Lysenkoism.
Yep.
And Naked Ape did a video on this. I'll link in the description, I suppose. But yeah, communism denies biology. It denies social science. It denies basic human nature or sociology. And when it realizes that it loses the practical argument, it becomes subversive, and then when its numbers get big enough, violent. Antifa is the perfect example of this, and they may be a bunch of wimps, but they terrify me.
Yeah. Oh yeah, because I mean, what's the scariest thing about Antifa is they can do this with almost impunity. I mean, because most of these guys are rich white kids from the suburbs, and they've been convinced by their dumbass professors to do this shit. And I mean, since they're all blacked out and whatnot,
Black bloc tactics.
yeah, they get away with it. And even when they do it in plain sight, or somebody has video footage of it, the police are very slow to get them. And I think it's because liberal cities, Antifa, their agitators, and their police force are working hand in hand. I mean, call it conspiratorial if you'd like, but I mean, they just don't get prosecuted the same. They put out these public statements like at Berkeley. Do not have weapons, bats, knives, anything like that. If you do, we're gonna arrest you. But who do they disarm? The right wingers.
They disarm the Proud Boys. They disarm the Trump boys. They disarm the alt-right. They disarm the Kekistanis. But Antifa, yeah,
They come right in.
They're given an absolute impunity on violence. Now, this last time, after the third battle of Berkeley, the following free speech rally, thank God Antifa stayed behind police lines. But it seems like communism just doesn't know when to quit, and when it loses the argument, brandishes the sword.
And the worst part about it is they're all like little fucking cucks, and they don't fight unless it's 20 on 1.
Yeah.
And even then, half the time they're like afraid to go in.
They're basically what my dad said: the difference between coyotes and wolves. Coyotes are a bunch of little chickens, insert expletive here. But when there's enough of them, then they'll gang up on you. Wolves, they don't give a crap. They got nothing to lose. They'll take you 1-on-1. They'll take you 1-on-5.
Yeah.
Antifa is coyotes. Strength in numbers, but on their own, they are wimps.
Yeah, and I mean, that's going to be the worst part, is if America falls because of Antifa and Islam and all that, I'm going to have these videos of Antifa getting their shit pushed in, archived, and just looking at the size differential between the right-wingers and them, and just like, how the fuck did this happen? And I mean, their tool is political correctness, and it's a brutal tool. And I'm just not sure if we caught it in time. I think maybe the 80s this should have been happening, but who knows? Who knows if it's too late?
Well, even Yuri Bezmenov himself said, when asked over 30 years ago, he said that the demoralization process is actually overfulfilled in America at this point. You no longer need outside influence in the Soviet Union or these communist nations. Now it's being done by Americans to Americans. You have, I don't know, dare I call it, the university communist industrial complex. What one could call it, it might as well be. Universities are just pumping out more and more of these kids, and as we're finding out, more and more local governments are either giving orders to stand down, or in the case of Berkeley, their mayor is affiliated with Antifa and one of its subsidiaries, BAM, by any means necessary. So we have local governments, and in some cases state governments, in the case of California more than likely, working with these filthy commies.
I think what Trump is kind of proving here is that a right-wing populist will never be popular enough to do the things that need to be done. And that is root out all of these commies from our local governments, from our state governments, and start putting, curb stomping these people.
Well, even California removed a law of theirs from like the 50s saying that no Communist Party member could run for state office.
Yeah.
They just removed that recently.
Holy crap.
Yeah, California is getting more cucked by the moment.
Yes, at an alarming rate. But I mean, I think, Fujimori is one of my favorite examples of this. They had a real problem with terrorism. I think it was left-wing terrorism in Peru in the 90s. And he did some things that, went against human rights and all that shit. But he put together death squads.
A la Pinochet.
Yeah. And these death squads were so efficient at what they did that they scared off the Shining Path, is what they were called. I think they were a Vietnamese communist group.
Vietnamese, that makes sense.
But yeah, they were so good at what they did. I mean, they hunted these people like animals, the way that they should be. And within 4 years of this, they were gone. Never had another car bombing by them. Never had another mass shooting, nothing like that. And I wonder why we didn't let McCarthy do what he had to do when he had the chance.
Exactly.
And I think, the Weather Underground should have been the first red flag where, hey, why aren't these people being executed for being treasonous bastards?
For sedition.
And Bill Ayers was free to walk in a few years.
He's a college professor, for Pete's sake.
Yeah.
He's allowed to instruct our our succeeding generations of students.
Yeah.
He's allowed free pass.
And that's what gets to me is, see, Fujimori caught flack for what he did. I think he's in jail now if he's not already dead. But he took care of the problem at hand. And he got his economy kickstarted again, and people started feeling safe again, and he did the one thing that you have to do with radicalized commies, or commies in general. You take them out. You scare the rest of them off because they're spineless. And when you do that, like Pinochet showed, they don't come back. They're scared, and a lot of them will see the light and come back to reality. But I don't think we have that opportunity in the U.S., especially, our Constitution would never allow it.
No.
The people generally wouldn't allow it.
No.
And the Fed has just gotten so big, it's futile to even try to fight it, or even to have a coup d'etat or coup de force, anything.
Coup d'etat wouldn't work.
Yeah,
It would have to be planned from the inside, and as we've seen, the inside is so loyal and so cucked that there's no way in hell.
Yeah, so I mean, basically what we're seeing right now is just the slow collapse. And I think what's going to be a surprise to a lot of these communists is that a lot of these, gun-toting right-wing lunatics that they think they're dealing with, they're going to see that that the country's going down, and yeah, they're going to do their own little purge of them before they get to see their little utopia or dystopia.
There's a reason why the Second Amendment mentions militias.
Yeah, and I just, I don't know, I just really hate communists.
I'm just behind you on that. I don't like the idea of murdering them, but again, I have to wonder: is there any situation other than Pinochet possible? I don't know. And as someone who tries to have some faith in humanity, especially being a Christian, I've seen the hardest of hearts change. Communism is a very weird one for me. I don't know if it can ever be dealt with peacefully, because they've demonstrated that they won't go peacefully. It's like Islam. Same thing. I'll deal with people on an individual basis, but if any mass group of them start coming after me, put a bullet in them. Not because I want to, but because I want to preserve my future, my posterity, and my country.
Well, I mean, it doesn't really count as murder since communists aren't really people. So.
should have seen that joke coming. Okay, now for all you leftists, jerking it to how much fuel you think you got on us, Isaac, what are your thoughts on the alt-right? And to put it into perspective, the alt-right, you don't just get to label every new young conservative alt-right. What the alt-right is, and actually is it's a movement that it's a very decentralized movement that believes that traditional conservatism and civic nationalism has failed, and the only way to preserve Western culture is to destroy multiculturalism and at least socially, not legally, but at least socially attack multiracialism. For some of them. And obviously, most alt-righters are not white supremacists. Most of them, I dare say, are not even white separatists. But they exist to point out, to remind everyone of all the good stuff white people did, basically. And now that we have that definition out of the way, Milo is not alt-right.
Gay Jew can't be.
They don't like Jews. They don't like gays. They don't like what they call degenerates.
Yep.
Stefan Molyneux is considered alt-light because he doesn't believe in separatism, but he does, toy with race realism and whatnot. Now that we have that definition out of the way, what do we do about the alt-right? And among their fringes, the neo-Nazi, or the anemic Ku Klux Klan, the usual straw man the left uses when talking about it. So I guess start with the alt-right itself, and then we can move on to the neo-Nazis and the Klan.
So the alt-right is, outside of memes, they're basically disliked by almost everyone. They have really no power. I do sympathize with some of their causes. They think traditional conservatism has failed them, and it has.
Oh, it has, exactly.
And I think that's definitely a point of theirs that I can sympathize with. I do think multiculturalism needs to be stamped out of our society, and I do think that nationalism needs to be it's paramount.
It needs to reign on high.
Yes. But outside of, their Harambes, their Pepes, their Nazi memes that make everybody laugh, they're just not very useful, because they go from the things that I think are really reasonable to off the deep end, gas all the Jews, and gays have to go too, and we need to have separatism. Some of them believe that, and then some of them believe that we just can't have interracialism at all. And I think most of us wouldn't be here if that were the case. But I don't think they have much sympathy in the mainstream, or even in anti-normie culture. They don't really have a lot of pockets of strength. They're just kind of dead fish right now. They make funny ass jokes sometimes, but generally they are kind of laughed at, and they're kind of just berated for their ideas on race. I don't know if the SJWs don't discontinue their belief in a racial hierarchy, and white people will need to fucking die, like that professor just said yesterday or something.
Yeah.
If they don't stop with that, the alt-right's gonna catch some steam.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that I don't see alt-right as like right-wing SJWs. I really don't. I see the alt-right as the only inevitable result of the left's identity politics. When people eventually get tired of being called racist and sexist just for being men and women, or being men and being white. Not even kidding. They don't have to do a single damn other thing. That they're gonna say, you know what, Fungar your mother. I'm gonna go be loud and proud white. I'm gonna celebrate my heritage, my culture, my accomplishments. And if you get to have your collectivism, well, I damn well deserve my collectivism. I think it was the only inevitable knee-jerk to the social justice left. That being said, again, I sympathize with much of what they say. They seem to know what the problem is more than most people do, but I don't agree on their proposed solutions. And this is coming from someone who actually likes white people better. Just saying, just saying. I like white people more. I don't know. I've met people I've liked and disliked from all races, so I'm an equal offender. Don't worry. It's like my grandpa says. I'm not prejudiced. I just hate them all. But yeah, in and of itself, I don't think that the alt-right is necessarily all that useful. I think that they're, in a way, perpetuating the problem.
Yeah.
Because, well, you don't fight identity politics with identity politics because the cycle never ends. Again, either everyone plays by different rules or everyone plays by the same rules.
Well, I think what's interesting is the left will always say, oh, white supremacy, we're built on white supremacy, our system is white supremacy. Well, if we're white supremacy through and through, why is the alt-right not the most popular thing in the world?
It should be, in theory.
Yeah.
It advocates for the return of the glorious age of the white race.
And why are they pathetically dwarfed by the SJWs in power? And it just kind of shows that.
And again, the SJWs are accepted by the mainstream left. The alt-right has no mainstream acceptance whatsoever. And the only people that the alt-right is sort of accepted by are like the neo-Nazis. But the alt-right doesn't even like the neo-Nazis.
Yeah. Nope. And I don't know, man. It's very strange that we live in a country where the majority is beholden to the minority.
Yeah,
and I think that goes for most of the West, with the exception of like Poland and Hungary.
East Europe, Romania, where they don't give a crap about political correctness. They give you the middle finger and say, "No, I don't care about your feelings. Go to hell." No, I sympathize with them, and in many ways, I do wish people would understand that white people did make all the good stuff. They kind of did. Just saying. But yeah, what irritates me is that they have one of the problems that the social justice warriors have is that they seem incapable of separating race from culture, and that's because of race realism. And I've been interested in reading up on it just so I can see its precepts, but I don't know. Speaking of race, the neo-Nazis, you've told me some interesting things about them.
Yes.
Do tell, if I'm not much mistaken, you've known some in your travels.
Yes. Oh, I'm actually still friends with a few. So, oh shit. Yeah, they're an interesting bunch. The true, I guess, card-carrying neo-Nazis are definitely socialists, and socialism is left-wing. So, at the very least, economically, they're left-wing. And a lot of them aren't even, white supremacists. They're just separatists. They don't believe in multiracialism because they're race realists. Mm-hmm. They say, look, there's a huge problem when these two demographics interact in mass. And on an individual basis, sure, maybe we get along a little bit. But our 67% or 70%, whatever it is now, and their 13% do not get along. And they attack us a lot more than we attack them, and so we need to have our own land, they need to have their own land, and just separate. And what's very interesting about them is they go from white to Hispanic to even like dark South American. I don't know. I just don't see Hispanic the same. like our Hispanic is basically Mexican.
Mestizo, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, his Hispanic is not even a race. It's a multiracial. We're mutts.
Yeah. Well, to word it better, I guess, they go from really light to really dark. And the way they justify this is they'll show me clips of different Nazi divisions in World War II that were from Spain, from France, from
North Africa.
Yeah, North Africa and
Arab Nazis.
Yes, and they're like, see, it's always been this way. I think it's definitely important to point out Hitler was a big fan of Islam, big fan, and people that ignore that, you say look no further than the ANP and the NOI, the American Nazi Party and the Nation of Islam, where Malcolm X and George Lincoln Rockwell collaborated, and Malcolm X also collaborated with the KKK in Georgia.
Really?
Yeah, they all had the what all three of these groups have in common is they don't like Jews. And because they don't like Jews so much, they decided, hey, they're the reason why we're fighting each other. If we can just get rid of them, then we can work on whatever. And so they worked on trying to separate the races, and of course it didn't really succeed, but
no, the American Nazi Party never took off. The Nation of Islam is still very cliquish. The Klan is anemic and barely existent these days.
Yeah, but I mean, it is important to point out that these supremacist organizations and these separatist organizations, they go hand in hand. Farrakhan, I'm pretty sure if there was another American Nazi Party, he'd probably get along with them too. Elijah Muhammad was the one that was coaxing Malcolm X into talking to them in the first place. And
it's very interesting too, because Isaac showed me a historical photograph of George Lincoln Rockwell and some other American Nazi Party members sitting at a giant Nation of Islam rally. Now, again, when we think Nazi, we think racist. It's like, no, the Nazis were not necessarily all racists, and the neo-Nazis especially, most of them aren't racist either. They're separatists.
Yeah.
And the reason why Malcolm X and George Lincoln Rockwell got along so well was because, again, they felt, you know what, individually we get along, but en masse we don't.
Yeah.
So let's give everyone their own countries.
Yeah. And I think that's what blows people's minds when they're like, oh, these neo-Nazis. I'm like, well, actually, I know a couple.
They're like, and they're not right-wing.
Yeah, they're like, what? And, and I go into it, and they leave in disbelief, and I'm just like, well, fuck. Now they think I'm a racist.
I mean, for Pete's sake, Nazi means National Socialism. It's just that instead of class warfare, they believe that socialism works with monolithic demographic makeup.
Yeah, well, as far as most of Europe has proved so far, it does.
And again, this is why I have some sympathies with the alt-right, but I ultimately don't agree with their solution.
Yeah.
Now, that being said, we'll end the serious stuff with this loaded question. I know you'd alluded to this before, and this is always an interesting conversation I have in and of itself with other people I know. With the radical left now in full violent force all over the Western world, and the continued failure of cultural libertarian ideals to take root in the West, what do you think is the ultimate fate of Western civilization? Can we save ourselves? Will Europe and America fall and be forced to reform in the fires of civil war?
If we're lucky, we'll have a civil war. I think that although we need to remain principled, the fact that we're saying, can we save the West, is already a tacit admittance of defeat. Because we're starting this fight on the back foot.
Yeah.
I think that whoever is more brutal in their tactics, whoever is more dishonest in their tactics, is going to win. And right now, that is the radical left. They're radicals, after all. They're the ones out in the streets. That the alt-right, maybe you'll catch a couple of them at a rally, maybe. Most of them are just shit posters that they don't really care. But right now, it's just looking like every day we're losing ground.
At least in the sense of civility in politics.
Yeah, and
culturally, I think we're shifting right, but pretty far right, considering that Generation Z is now the most conservative generation since the silent generation, which fought World War II for Pete's sake. But yeah, what's troubling is that it seems that while society's shifting rightward, away from social justice, it's also becoming more violent.
Yeah. And even though the right wing is known for having the weapons and all that, the feds, the military, is controlled by mostly globalists. So I think, I mean, even if it does come to blows where right-wingers are just blasting Antifa and blasting social justice warriors and blasting campus extremists, I mean, like, literally blasting them with guns, that is a dream for the federal government. Because, hey, we can kill two birds with one stone now. We take away everyone's rights. You guys obviously had too much freedom, so we needed to dial it back. And once you lose civil liberties, they never come back.
Not without another violent revolution, and God knows how long those take to form again.
Yeah, and I think everyone's gotten too comfortable to fight. I mean, every poor person has a fridge. Most of them have a car. They have cell phones. Their life is too comfortable for there to be a real revolution. There's not really that many people starving. You know, we don't really have anybody that's like diseased and walking in the streets. That's not a common thing. You know, I mean, if
we don't see the income and life disparities that you would see in like a Christmas Carol, where you got people starving and disease ridden on the streets, and then the patricians just enjoying a rich, bourgeoisie life.
Yeah, and if social entitlement programs, social welfare programs weren't so big, and people were meant to fend for themselves, and they were still failing in large numbers, if the 26% of people on welfare, if that 26% were made to suffer, just suffer, I mean starve, your family's out on the streets, there's nowhere to go but up for you, there would be talks of revolution all over the place. But there's not. And that's because I think in the U.S. we don't know poverty the way the rest of the world knows it, or at least in the West. It's not, oh shit, today is do or die. It's, well, I mean, do I really want to go fight in the revolt? Like, I mean, it's not that bad.
Making ends meet in the first world is not anywhere close to the same thing as making ends meet in the third world, or even the second world.
Yeah, I mean, like, at my old apartment, the worst it got was, fuck, man, like, I only have crackers, and, like, I have some cheese. I don't really like cheese, but I need calories, so I'm gonna eat the cheese with the crackers.
Cheese and crackers, that's a better meal than most people in the world get.
Yeah, well, we also have this belief of relative poverty rather than absolute, but, as an example, and it's like, well, I can still get water out of my sink, I can still,
We have water, for Pete's sake.
Yeah, and it's just like, I'm not really that hungry, I'm not thirsty at all, like, I sleep in my bed, and the lights are still on, and like I can go to the bathroom and flush the toilet, I can shower, making a rent might be a little tough this week, but I'm not really too hard pressed. Now, if it was like 2 full years of eating cheese and crackers, and like my lights shut off halfway through the year, and like my water wasn't paid anymore, and like I was just like, fucked. Maybe I'd become radicalized. I'd be like, hey, this system is fucked, man. Like, we need to fight. But the people that want the revolution are the ones that are being told this is our reality, and by our reality I mean brown and black people, They're being told that this is brown and black people's reality. They're starving out in the streets. They're this, they're that, they're this. And these white bourgeois kids are like, oh fuck, we got to do something. And so this is what they think is right, Antifa. And I think a revolution to stop Marxism is not going to happen because people are too comfortable. And even if we did, we'd lose miserably, and we'd also just lose all our rights. Anybody who survived really would just lose all their rights after that.
In the current state that this all is.
Yeah. I think that's what they're hoping for. They're hoping that Antifa pushes someone on the right way too far. That person goes on a shooting spree in a crowded area, and then you just see the rights of people start going. Liberties just gone, one by one by one.
It's a grim picture.
I mean, this is just, some of my ideas,
if things don't change, that is.
Yeah, but I think that we'll die a very slow death, because, like I said, people are too comfortable to fight back. Shit, I'm too comfortable to fight back. I wouldn't really want to risk the life that I have right now, especially after getting stabbed, to fight again.
It would be a terrifying prospect. I mean, I'm armed, but again, that doesn't mean that I necessarily wouldn't kick and scream the whole way.
Yeah.
to being driven to my militia.
Yeah.
Oh man. Wow. So let's talk about lighter stuff. Just to finish off.
Yeah.
Finish off. Keep this personal. I don't know. Tell the audience a little bit about yourself. Favorite music taste in movies, shows, internet stuff.
All right. So, I guess I'll just list off some of my favorite bands. Black Marble is definitely up there. I'm gonna go see them in 2 weeks. Then I have to drive to a wedding 10 hours away immediately after.
Oh, dang.
So I'm gonna be up from probably 6 a.m. to noon the next day, and then have a 2-hour nap, and then go to the wedding. But they're like a post-punk synth kind of deal. Joy Division might be something that makes you think of them, or you might think of Joy Division once you listen to them. Chastity Belt, I know that they're like a huge feminist band, but I really like them. I saw them a few weeks ago over here at Bowie Feathers before they changed it to The Perch for some reason. And their new album just released like 2 days ago or 3 days ago. It's awesome. And Billy Changer's another one. Grave Babies, they finally released a single that might make me forget about their shitty third album. Oh god, that thing was terrible. What'd you say, movies, was it?
Yeah, well, you said the genre of all of these music. It was like sort of punkish.
Oh yeah, Chastity Belt is like post-punk and I'm very slow on my subgenres now. Generally they're post-punk, and then Grave Babies is goth. And then Billy Changer is like rockabilly and goth kind of put together. And he's a really interesting guy. And then did I say anybody else? I think that was it.
I think it was mainly those.
Yeah.
I don't know, tastes in movies and TV shows, your favorite genres.
So I really like kind of out of the ordinary movies. I really do like something like a what's the word for somebody who's a neurotic character. I really like those.
Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah, like Buffalo 66. That's probably my favorite movie of all time. I actually messaged the director. He is a huge right winger. Vincent Gallo. I tried to get him for Bridge the Divide, and he actually replied to my email. And I honestly didn't think he would, because that email is like 12 years old, and I was like, well, let's just take a shot in the dark. And he was like, hey, thanks for the message, that was really nice of you, but sadly, like, I don't do any, or unfortunately I didn't do any like interviews for any reason. I was like, fuck. Like, I should have offered him a part in a fake movie or something just to get him over here. I mean, he would have been pissed and everything, but it would have been cool to see him. Yeah, like, if you know who he is or you don't know who he is, check out his website. I think it's just vincentgallo.net or something. It's fucking hilarious. He was like one of the first right-wing trolls back in the 90s. Like, he was awesome. Yeah, The Lobster is another good one. Let me think. The Green Room, I really like that one. And Drive. Let me think. Yeah, I mean, I like a lot of movies. The more believable the dialogue, the better. I don't really like movies with prophetic dialogue, just like I don't like novels with prophetic dialogue. I'm like, nobody talks like that. Go fuck yourself. You know, just, I guess in that way, and forgive me, capitalists, I do like Hemingway in that sense. But yeah, then there's what do you call it? What was the other one we were talking about?
Oh, just movies, TV shows, Netflix shows, online shows, YouTube tastes.
Oh, okay. TV shows, because I don't have cable anymore, like...
It's okay, man. I use Netflix and the internet.
I was a really big fan of The Nick with Clive Owen. I really like Clive Owen. And that one's about a surgeon in like the 20s, I think. He works at the Knickerbocker in New York, and he's kind of unhinged, and he's a cocaine addict, and then he gets onto heroin in the second season, and then that's where my knowledge of the show just drops off. Silicon Valley, I fucking love that show. I mean, it's a bunch of liberals, but they're actually funny. Like, they're actually funny liberals, so it's not too bad. It's one thing to have like a show written by liberals. It's another thing to have them like pressing their bullshit on you. Orange is the New Black is probably the worst offender of that I've ever seen.
I hear it's nothing but a bunch of.
It's social justice porn.
I was gonna say it's nothing but a bunch of lesbian orgies, is what I hear.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
Which sucks, considering the fact that one of the characters, played by how did I forget her name? I'm ashamed of Star Trek. Kate Mulgrew. She played Captain Catherine Janeway from Star Trek Voyager. Dude, Captain Janeway is a boss. But like, apparently, like, this is like her next really huge role, and then to hear that the show is just a bunch of lesbian smut.
Yeah, no, it's just social justice porn. I actually might start doing a video series just tanking these things, because, dude, it's bad. I mean, it's blatant. It's not even like, oh, that's a funny joke. It was just like, Jesus Christ, did you just read Salon? You know, like, what was this? And
go leave your HuffPo wet dreams somewhere else, please.
Yeah, and I mean, oh god, I only saw a couple episodes, but I was just like, Jesus. And then The Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt.
My sister has actually watched that. She says it's actually really interesting.
The first season is funny. The second and third season, I think it's second and third season, just go into social justice 101.
Really?
Like, yeah, and it's just like...
I had hopes for the show after seeing the first episode.
Yeah, oh yeah, it's quirky, it's funny, the first season. And then after that, it's just like, it gets tiresome with the social justice points. Yeah, I really should do reviews of these things, because it seems harmless, and like, you know, people might get indoctrinated this way, where it's like, oh, well, this is oppression, and like, you know, these little talking points that aren't nuanced or anything. And they're not even really jokes. Like, they're not even cleverly masked jokes. It's just like, fuck Republicans. It's like, what? Are you kidding me?
Way to be subtle.
Yeah, and let me think. Yeah, and then on YouTube, big shout out to that guy T. He was the first libertarian and anti-feminist that I ever watched. And, I mean, while I was still in my big-ass cast and shit, sleeping like 14 hours a day, I would watch his videos, and he really turned me onto the arguments that I've now like internalized and started to learn from. Like, hey, there's a different way of thinking. And yeah, Matt Christensen definitely is another one, and Mouthy Buddha, Wild Smile, and the Neo Unrealist are some of my favorites right now.
Yeah, interesting tastes. I just wish I was able to keep up with more mainstream stuff. Yeah, I mean, here I am. I listen to classical music, video game music, and yes, that includes the chiptune 8-bit and 16-bit stuff. Not even kidding. I was a band geek. Sue me. I like music with no words. My tastes in music with words are all over. I have, occasional pop song, occasional country song, occasional rock song, occasional oldies.
Well, you know what? There's two bands I'd like to suggest, given your affinity for chiptune and for instrumentals. Those are Crying, just Crying. They're from New York. The guitarist, he uses a Game Boy and programmed it to play their music.
I've heard of bands who've done stuff like
this. He's
Steven Universe, and by the way, I'm wearing a Steven Universe shirt. Not even kidding. I'm in the red shirt with the star, and I'm wearing jeans and flip-flops. It's sorry, go on.
Yeah, well, there's that, and then Adebisi Shank. They came here a few years ago. I remember buying their second album. Very interesting bunch. There's 3 of them, and no vocals, just very interesting instrumentals. They would resemble Battles if Battles hadn't become what it is now. Battles is far more intricate, very sparse vocals. Interesting too.
Interesting. And as a final send off, thank you, Isaac, for your time. I know this went on very long, and I don't intend future episodes to go on this long, but as the pilot, I guess it only makes sense. What political philosophy books would you most recommend for me to read to help me better understand sort of your worldview? I mean, I know we share almost everything in common. We're both conservatarians, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
But as someone who's trying to get into more political, philosophy book, your Adam Smiths of the world, your Thomas Paines, or even your more contemporary stuff like Thomas Sowell and whatnot. What are a couple of really good books I should read?
First, you've got to go with Ayn Rand. I would say The Fountainhead.
The Fountainhead.
That's definitely one that opened me up to a lot of counter arguments, actually, where it was like, well, selfishness is actually a good thing, and it's probably the best thing you can do for yourself. And it's probably the best thing, if you're a talented individual, it's probably the best thing you can do for your society, is invest in yourself. And it also has a lot to do with like integrity and all kinds of other things, but that's definitely a big one for me. And then I would have to say Crime and Punishment is a huge influence on me. I don't know, I just I guess the ideas that go on in this novel, you really have to think about what hadn't happened yet when this was written, and then you have to pose that against Hitler's idea of the superhuman and the ramifications of these ideas in both the novel and in how they played out in real life. And maybe 1919 by Dos Passos. He was a commie, like a filthy commie at the time, and so you can kind of see how they think in this. Of course, he he grew a brain and said, no, fuck communism, at some point during his life. But yeah, when you read this, and there's actually some things that make me think he hadn't completely drank the Kool-Aid at that point.
He was still at a point where he could be taught.
Yes, and yeah, he was very critical of Churchill. I mean, not Churchill. Of who was our guy during World War
One.
Was that?
I'm ashamed.
Wilson.
There we go. Woodrow Wilson.
Yeah.
Arguably one of the most, if not the most, progressive president in American history.
Yeah. Well, he was critical of him, and a lot of what he was saying in there was, hey, we fought this big war, we sacrificed a whole bunch of our country for it. Well, why did we not get more out of the deal? And so at that point, I'm thinking, that sounds like something a capitalist would say. Like, we put in the resources, we did the most work, how come our labor did not produce fruits? Or it did produce fruits, we just didn't get any of them. You're shitty negotiators. And so, yeah, I think looking inside the mind of a communist is definitely something that I think most capitalists, or every capitalist, needs to do. Because you need to see how they think in order to understand how to argue against them. Because if you always go in with, oh, my ideas are obviously the best because, I mean, they're axiomatic.
Yeah, because they're common sense, of course.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, if you always go in doing that, you're not going to convince many people. And I think that's why a lot of teachers, a lot of leftist teachers go into teaching young children and impressionable people because they can't argue on their own merits. I mean, how many times have we seen Ben Shapiro just annihilate a doctor, And it just makes sense to me. Like, if you go in thinking my ideas are the best, nobody else can match up to them, you're just not going to convince anybody. You're not going to grow, and you're never going to understand the other side, so you'll never find a solution. And that's the thing with communists. You have to get them when they're like 19, 20. Because if you go with them at 18 when they've just freshly been indoctrinated, it's a nightmare. It's a goddamn nightmare.
Well, as the old saying goes, if you're not a leftist by the time you're 20, you're heartless. But if you ain't a conservative by the time you're 40, you're just plain stupid. I guess that means that I was a heartless 20-year-old, or smart. I like how Ape and Kraut put it best. That it seems that the appeals that the left and the right use. The left says, "Oh, I'm the good guy."
Yeah.
The right says, "I'm the smart guy."
Yeah.
So, well, Isaac, thank you very much for your time, and I hope this was informative to all audiences out there. And again, I know this went on kind of long. I intend for my future conversations to be more concise, but I figured that it was only fitting that my friend and colleague here be the first guest.
Yeah, thank you for having me on, and I apologize to everybody for rambling. I hope I do not do that in the future works that I may present.